shall be my angels of death, the bringers of swift judgment and the spears that shatter my foes.
The vast grim darkness of the Warhammer 40K galaxy is defined by iconic imagery, the towering cathedral fortresses, the endless ranks of the Astra Militarum, and the arcane might of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and perhaps most crucially, the imposing figures of the Space Marines. Known as the Adeptus Astartes, these genetically engineered transhuman warriors are the Emperor's angels of death, the elite shock troops of the Imperium, capable of unparalleled feats of warfare. Their very existence has shaped the history and nature of this fictional universe. But what if this cornerstone of the Imperium never existed? What if the Emperor's 20 Primarch sons were never conceived, and their legions of peerless warriors never mustered? This video delves into the profound hypothetical consequences of such an absence, exploring how the Imperium would have fared without its most revered defenders, from the Great Crusade through to the 41st Millennium. Greetings all, I'm your guide, the Archivist. Today I will dive into what if the Astartes never existed. Before we begin, please make sure to like the like and subscribe waypoints, or join to become an acolyte down below, so that more people can learn from the archives. The Great Crusade, the era when the Emperor of mankind set out to reunite humanity across the stars, is intrinsically linked to the Primarchs and their Space Marine legions. In the established lore, it was the legions, spearheaded by their superhuman fathers, who conquered countless worlds, pacified Xenos empires, and crushed human pocket empires that had risen in the Age of Strife. Their speed, resilience, and overwhelming combat prowess were essential to the rapid expansion that defined this era. Without the Astartes, the task of reunifying humanity would fall primarily upon the shoulders of the burgeoning Imperial army, the Imperial Navy, and the forces of the Adeptus Mechanicus. In this alternate history, the Great Crusade would undoubtedly be a far slower, bloodier, and more arduous undertaking. The Imperial army, composed of baseline humans, albeit often highly trained and well-equipped, would lack the spearhead shock assault capacity of the Astartes. Conquest would rely more heavily on massed infantry assaults, extensive orbital bombardments by the Navy, and large-scale armoured warfare. Fortified worlds would require protracted sieges rather than decapitating strikes by Terminator armoured boarding parties. Xenos empires possessing significant military or technological sophistication would present even greater challenges, potentially halting Imperial expansion in certain sectors entirely. The sheer scale of attrition among the human population would be astronomical, dwarfing the already horrific casualties of the canonical Crusade. While the Emperor's strategic genius and the technological might of the Mechanicus would still be potent factors, the lightning war tactics enabled by the legions would be impossible. Unification would likely take centuries longer, facing increased resistance and potentially fracturing before completion. The absence of the Astartes has its most dramatic hypothetical impact on the event that plunged the Imperium into its darkest age, the Horus Heresy. The heresy, as told in the lore, was fundamentally a civil war orchestrated by chaos, fought between brother Primarchs and their Astartes legions. Without the Primarchs, there would be no charismatic superhuman figures to lead such a massive unified rebellion. The carefully nurtured rivalries and bonds between Primarchs, expertly manipulated by the ruinous powers, are gone. Does this mean that chaos doesn't try to destabilize and overthrow the Emperor? Absolutely not. Chaos is an eternal threat. However, its methods would need to adapt significantly. Instead of turning vast elite armies of transhumans, chaos would rely on its insidious corruption of baseline humanity, spreading cults among its populace, subverting officers within the Imperial army and navy, twisting the doctrines of the Mechanicus, and unleashing demonic incursions wherever the veil between realities was thin. Rebellion would likely manifest as widespread fragmented civil wars, planetary uprisings, and fleet mutinies rather than a single galaxy-spanning conflict led by demigods. The scale and intensity of the conflict would differ vastly, potentially preventing the catastrophic tearing of reality that the heresy caused, but leaving the Imperium vulnerable to countless smaller, yet still devastating insurrections. The Siege of Terror, if it occurred at all, would be a battle fought primarily by millions of human defenders against corrupted humans, demonic hordes, and potentially rogue Mechanicus constructs, lacking the titanic duels and Legion versus Legion clashes that defined the original narrative. Transitioning into the 41st millennium, the Imperium without the Adeptus Astartes is a fundamentally different entity, reliant on different strengths and facing threats with different means. The defense of this vast, beleaguered empire would rest almost entirely on the shoulders of the twin pillars of baseline humanity, the Astra Militarum and the Imperial Navy. The Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard, would be the undisputed cornerstone of Imperial military power. Its scale, already staggering in the established lore, would be even more immense. Billions upon billions of soldiers, drawn from every corner of the Imperium, would form the bulk of the defense. Warfare would consistently revolve around massed infantry formations, supported by colossal batteries of artillery, vast columns of tanks, and aerospace support. The details of Imperial doctrine would heavily emphasize overwhelming firepower, grinding attrition, and holding the line through sheer weight of numbers and unyielding faith. Casualties already horrendous in the canonical Imperium would be even more readily accepted as the necessary cost of survival. Regiments would be raised, fight, and be annihilated on scales that would make it even the standard 40k reality blanch. The Imperial Navy's role would also be elevated further. Without Astartes' rapid deployment capabilities, controlling stellar space and conducting planetary assaults or relief efforts would rely entirely on void superiority and orbital insertion via mass troop transports. Fleet actions would be the primary means of engaging large Xenos fleets, from spreading unchecked between star systems. Warp travel security, already precarious, would potentially be even worse without the localized cleansing actions sometimes performed by Space Marine vessels. Facing the myriad threats of the galaxy would require different strategies. Orc's perpetual engines of war would be contained through vast lines of defense, large-scale tank battles, and orbital intervention, rather than targeted strikes against war bosses. Tyranid hive fleets, the ultimate threat of consumption, would be met by desperate, planet-scale battles of attrition, potentially relying more heavily on exterminatus than the surgical eradication achieved by Space Marine chapters. Containing and purging chaos cults and demonic incursion would fall to the combined might of the Imperial Guard, the Sisters of Battle, and the Inquisition, whose need for rapid, decisive action would still exist but lack the Astartes' means of execution. Other threats like the Necron's awakening or the complex intrigues of the Eldar would be met with the blunt force of conventional warfare. The Custodes would remain on Terra, the Emperor's personal guard, rarely deployable save for the most dire, realm-shaking emergencies. Technologically, the Imperium might see different priorities. Resources canonically poured into the Astartes' gear, power armor, bolters, specialized vehicles might be redirected. Perhaps the Imperial Guard would have access to more advanced weaponry or better armored vehicles across the board. The Adeptus Mechanicus might focus even more on the production of Titans and Knight suits, seeking alternative forms of heavily armed shock assault units, though none could replicate the tactical flexibility and deep strike capabilities of the Astartes. Culturally, the Imperium would lack the iconic heroes and demigods that the Space Marines represent. Propaganda would focus purely on the unwavering faith, stoic sacrifice, and sheer resilience of the common human soldier. The image of the Emperor might shift subtly, still revered as a god, but perhaps more of an architect of human survival through faith and unity, rather than the progenitor of superhuman saviors. The concept of martyrdom would be even more central to the Imperial faith, celebrating the millions who died daily for the Golden Throne. In this hypothetical reality, the Imperium would be a realm defined even more absolutely by relentless war and unimaginable sacrifice. It would be an empire clinging precariously to existence through sheer unyielding mass and the furnace of faith, lacking the shining albeit terrifying beacon of the Space Marines. The question of whether it could survive at all becomes even more stark. Could massed human forces truly hold back the worst of the galaxy has to offer? The canonical Imperium, with all its flaws, relies heavily on the Astartes as a crucial, albeit small piece of its defense. Without them, the weight on the shoulders of baseline humanity would be almost unbearable, the future even more grim and uncertain.
Billions die every day to protect the Imperium. Their names are unrecorded, their sacrifices unmourned, saved by the God Emperor of mankind on his golden throne. This is the true cost of our survival.
This alternate reality underscores the unique and vital role of the Adeptus Astartes play in the Warhammer 40K verse. Their absence would not simply remove a military unit, it would rewrite history, alter the nature of warfare, and fundamentally change the character and capabilities of the Imperium, leaving it as a state built entirely on the blood and bone of its baseline human citizenry, facing an even bleaker, more desperate struggle for survival. And so I have now covered the content for this video, but if there's anything that has been missed, please share them in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this content, please like the like and subscribe waypoints, or join to become an acolyte down below, so that more people can learn from the archives. Consider continuing your journey into the librarium with the video displayed on screen. In the grim dark of the far future, there is only war.